So this week we're gonna talk about the next step on the building of our new exploration aluminum sailboat.
Hi, I'm Roberta.
And I'm Duca.
And after bringing a sailboat that was neglected for over 22 years back to life, we moved aboard, and for the next 2 years we explored the Brazilian coast and part of the Caribbean, where we got an offer that changed our lives once again. We sold our boat and we moved to France, where we are building our new 43-foot aluminum exploration sailboat.
And while the boatyard is building the hull of our new sailboat, we are learning the craft by converting a camper van to get ready to build the interior and all the systems of the boat ourselves.
So don't forget to subscribe and to join us every Sunday for a new episode.
So today, instead of talking about things we want to change on our new boat, if you don't know, we are building an aluminum exploration sailboat in France at Meta Boatyard. And of course, when you build a new boat, you change a lot of things, small and big, that you don't like on the previous boat. But you also keep some things that you really like on the old boat. And today we're going to talk about something that we really like on the old boat, the diesel and the water tanks. But of course, there's always some little details that we can fix, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Just like everything else, when you build an aluminum sailboat, there's always something that you need to be careful. Otherwise, aluminum corrodes really quick, and you need to avoid electrolysis, and that's always the main concern of an aluminum sailboat. If you do it properly, there is no problem at all, and it lasts for a long time, for many years. But if you do it wrong, you can have a problem really quick. So in order to do it properly, you have a few different options. For example, we could have just a water tank and a diesel tank out of composite, out of plastic, that is just locked to the hull of the boat, and that if we have problems we can replace and put a different one, and that's an option. But also another option that some people like and some people don't is to have the tank as aluminum welded to the hull of the boat. That means integrated to the structure of the boat, just like we had on odd, but in aluminum, not only steel that we had before. We really like that solution, and the reason why we like the solution of having the tank as part of the hull is because you are much lower on the center of gravity. So when you weld the tank to the bottom plate, that means there is no way you are lower than that, and it's really good for the motion of the boat that you put all the weight down and center on the boat. And the other problem for me is that if you have a tank that's composite, usually it's going to sit on the top of the frames, and that means there is a space in between the frame and the tank that is hard to reach. So you're not only going to have the weight higher, you're also going to create a place that's hard to inspect. And then you're going to say, but you can take the tank out and inspect. How often are you really going to take a big tank out of the boat and inside the cabinetry, inside the bed? It's just really complicated. And then of course, if you have any leak on the boat, that eventually you have a leak somewhere, it's always going to end up in the place that you cannot reach. And that's really problematic, because if you have water sitting on a metal, eventually it's going to become a problem. And I rather not have these places that you cannot see. I rather have everything that can eventually collect water in a place that I can see and I can maintain, and I can make sure that there is no water ever there. So I really like the solution of having an integrated tank, and that's what we're going to have on this boat. Oh, by the way, we're going to have 2 water tanks of 300 liters each, that means a total of 600, and 2 diesel tanks of 400 each, that means 800 liters total. And that's already one of the differences between this boat and our old boat. Our previous boat, we had 1 diesel tank and 1 water tank. And that means if I have problems in one tank, I have problems in all my tanks, because I just have one. If I have a big leak, or if somehow I put diesel on the water, that could happen, you have no water at all, because you just contaminate the entire tank because you just have one. The other problem is if you have a diesel tank that's too big and you create algae, you have algae in all your fuel. If you have 2 tanks, you can divide the fuel in 2 different tanks, and you can also create a system that we want to build that is what they call polishing system, that I can transfer the fuel from one tank to the other with a pump and filter the water in between. So that means I can keep oxygenating and cleaning the tank by moving the diesel in between tanks. And that's, for me, that's really good when you have a big tank. Train. The other difference is that when you have a steel boat, you need to paint both the diesel tank and the water tank. On an aluminum boat, you can leave raw the diesel tank. You don't need to paint at all. There is no problem. There is no corrosion because there is no problem at all with the diesel. But with the water tank, on the other hand, if you add water with chlorine, it's going to contaminate the water and it's going to create electrolysis because chlorine corrodes aluminum. So you need to paint the tank, and also because if you don't paint the tank, you're going to drink that water, and that water can be contaminated with aluminum, and that's not good for your body. So we rather paint with epoxy paint the water tank and leave it raw, the diesel tank. We're going to use epoxy paint that is food graded. That means you can put water that you're going to drink, so there is no problem at all, and that's the idea. And to make it easier, we asked the boatyard already to pre-sand the inside part of the water tank. That means the surface is a lot more rough to adhere the paint. Of course, we're going to need to light sand again on the top just to make sure we take that little layer of oxidation that's natural from the aluminum, because it's been like a month that is sanded already. But it's going to make our lives a lot easier when the time comes. So at this point, the diesel and the water tanks are done, are ready. There's only one thing that I want to fix once we get the boat to start working by ourselves. I saw that actually when they were building the boat, and I disagree, but I didn't want to create a friction in between us and the boatyard, and I thought this is so easy to fix later that I don't care, I will fix it later. So when you have a big lid, a big hatch on a diesel or water tank on an aluminum boat, there is an equation that's really important. So in order not to have leaks, there is 3 factors that you need to take in consideration. One is the thickness of the lid. The other one is the distance in between bolts of the flange. So there's a lot of bolts, and the distance in between bolts it's really important. And also the thickness of the rubber, of the seal. You need to balance these 3 points. For example, if you want to use a really thin gasket, you need to have the bolts really close to each other with a really thick lid. If you're gonna have a really thick gasket, that means you can have a little bit thinner plate, or you can have the bolts a little bit more apart. You cannot have bolts apart with thin gasket and with a thin lid. It doesn't work. You're gonna get a leak. So you need to compensate these 3 points, and I believe the thickness of the lid is good. It's like 5 millimeters. The thickness of the gasket I can choose later, but I believe that the distance in between bolts is a little bit too far apart. On our old boat we had 7 centimeters, that means 70 millimeters in between bolts, and now they did it 10 millimeters, so that means a little bit more apart than our old boat that I thought was already too far. But that's really easy to fix because I just add 1 bolt in between each one of the bolts, and we are going to end up with 5 centimeters. And 5 centimeters is pretty good, and we can do that once we get the boat. And one last thing we need to fix on this tank is that on our old boat, Odd, we had a lot of problem with noise. There was no baffles inside the tank, and that means it was really long from one side of the boat to the other side of the boat. And when we had half tank, the diesel or the water would hit the lid and make so much noise. It was so loud, and you could feel the movement of the liquid inside the tank, and that's really bad. First of all, because it changes the center of gravity of the boat. If the whole liquid goes to one side, you change the ballast of the boat pretty much, and also because it makes a lot of noise. On this boat, first of all, the tank is not going to go from one side to the other. It's just one tank in one side, another tank in the other side, and there is not much space for the liquid to move. But also we are going to add what they call baffle balls. So it's a lot of plastic balls that you fill up the entire tank with plastic balls. It's really cool because it's not one baffle. It's just like a lot of little surface that's going to help a lot to make sure the liquid doesn't move from one side to the other. And with all that, I think we fix all the problems. It's all good, and we already have some water and diesel tanks. Of course, we need to build the system with pumps and filters to make sure we keep that clean for as long as possible, but that's for when we receive the boat, not for now. That's it. Before I go, check this out. Making a lot of progress. This is a future project you'll see really soon. I've been working on our new workshop and it looks amazing. See you guys in the next one.